Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick update on my experience with the Lenovo Yoga Pro 2. Now this is the Core i5 configuration. It comes with 4 gigs of RAM, a 128 gigabyte SSD, Wi-Fi, BG, and N connectivity, Bluetooth 4.0. You've got a pair of USB ports. In fact, I'll take you around the machine right now. The price point is probably the most intriguing, which is that it's $1,000, which makes it a direct competitor for something like the MacBook Air. Of course, this is a 13.3-inch display you're getting here, and also one of the most high-res in the business. We're looking at a 3200 by 1800 resolution IPS display. As you can see, we've got our power port there on the far left. This is the left-hand side of the Ultrabook, a USB 3.0 port, micro HDMI output, and then, of course, a full-size SD card slot. A lot of ventilation on the bottom of the laptop. You can see right there on the right and left side over here. And then along the entire top, we have ventilation. By top, I mean the base of the actual frame. So plenty of ventilation here. In my experience so far, it does get a little bit hot. Nothing unbearable, but I think that is in large part to do with the fact that this is a very thin machine, if you haven't already noticed. So that it probably is where most of the heat issues source from, but I haven't seen anything happen with regard to performance as a result of that heat. Just gets a little warm, so fair warning. Another USB port over here, also capable of charging while the machine is sleeping if you enable that within the OS. Headphone jack, your volume rocker, mute button, and then a reset button, your power button, and your activity LED for charging. You can see right now the power button is blinking because the machine is hibernating. So basically the entire appeal of the Yoga, of course, are the positions that it can take on. Therein lies the name. So if I just open up the machine, we're in a traditional clamshell mode, what every laptop, Ultrabook machine looks like. And in fact, that's part of the beauty of the Yoga, is that it so much is the original concept that we're all used to, but then it incorporates that 360-degree range of motion for, of course, articulating the screen. Now, the keyboard, very traditional. It is backlit, which is certainly a nice thing. Missing from the original Yoga, so a big improvement in my opinion. In fact, that was one of the many reasons I personally, besides screen resolution, wasn't interested in what the Yoga had to offer, at least in the first gen form. But the price point, I think, is a big appeal, whether you're going with the Core i5 like this model here or the i7 at 1200. They both are incredible values, but they aren't perfect machines. Not that any perfect machines exist, but I've already encountered some issues, which I will discuss through the course of this video. But overall, really like the keyboard. Again, backlit, nice. Trackpad, relatively solid. I'll be showing you some of the performance in a moment, but let's get on to the screen, because really what this video is about the actual poses that the Yoga takes on, which aren't new in terms of concept, but right now, again, as I mentioned, we're in clamshell, traditional laptop mode. Now, if I go ahead and flip it over to what is referred to as tent mode, now we are in the desktop, it will immediately identify that it has been flipped. And this is part of the beauty of what Lenovo has done with the Yoga concept. So it's not just the range of motion, but also they've incorporated at least enough software to make practical use of what you're doing. So right now, tent mode, obviously yet another means of using your laptop, in this case Ultrabook, as a presentation device. You can also, of course, go to full tablet mode. And all of these modes will independently identify on the machine. In fact, Lenovo will prompt you to use the machine in different ways because of the form factor it's taken on. Of course, when you're in tablet mode like we are right now, the entire keyboard is disabled. So you can see I'm hitting keys, I'm touching the trackpad. If I do that while we're on the other side, nothing is going to happen. Orientation, as you may have noticed, relatively quick. I mean, the Haswell processor in here is solid. It is a low voltage chip, but you do get the added bonus of slightly better graphics than the original generation. We're now looking at Intel's 4400 HD solution, which does outperform ever so slightly, but enough. Any performance increase is always welcomed when it comes to gaming and video performance, especially in something as thin and light as this, or any Ultrabook for that matter. The actual Windows key, the Windows button, which you see I just activated incidentally or accidentally, does give off a nice haptic feedback when touching it. Very quick on response. Everything looks great. Screen resolution, in my opinion, very nice. So far, impressed with it. But it is tough for me to tell, I have to say. When you get up to this sort of resolution, it's one of those things where it really becomes a question of, can you really see the difference with your own eyes? It is a matter of personal ability, I will call it, rather than even preference. Because for me right now, it's tough for me to distinguish the real difference between this resolution and a traditional 1080p panel, of course IPS in the same form factor. Now I'm sure there are those of you out there that will appreciate this more so than I. Maybe you have better vision, but for me, I'm not yet seeing a tremendous advantage, at least in traditional desktop mode, to having this extra resolution outside of when I'm looking at photographs where I can actually leverage the resolution. So if you're dealing with raw 24 megapixel stills, then you've got something to do with this res. But otherwise, it's definitely more of a marketing gimmick than anything else, but a welcomed one at that, who would not want higher res out of their respective screen. In terms of build quality, that's something I want to talk about because, of course, with that incredible price point comes some question. By the way, you just heard that notification, and you can notice, well, it just disappeared. But that was the prompt I was trying to demonstrate or show before that comes up whenever you switch modes, which essentially Lenovo will identify that you're using it in a different mode. So if I go to tablet mode, let's see if now it identifies, and yes, it does. You can see right there, we've got tent mode, or tablet mode, excuse me, and it'll prompt their own picks within essentially the Microsoft application store, but really it's just Lenovo's way of customizing your experience through Windows 8 apps that can directly leverage the different modes. And that's why they're exactly saying right here, just to make it as clear as possible for everyone, tablet mode, use this mode to hold the device in your hands when you want to read ebooks and magazines or simply browse the web. And then they recommend apps. And this is pretty much what they do for every different position. Of course, there are only 4 positions. It's a gimmick, no question about it, but that's the selling point. That's why it's called the Yoga. As far as how practical it is as a tablet, not so much because of its weight. I mean, the sheer size, granted it's thin and it's light, this is a 13.3-inch device. So no matter how light we are able, even in the future, to make devices like this, the level of fatigue is not going to be comparable to something like a traditional Android or iOS-driven tablet. There's no question about it. Or, of course, a Windows 8 tablet or Surface tablet. The new ones, of course, just launching. So this is definitely an interesting pick, a good value, but I was mentioning build quality. Nothing really glaring in terms of the keyboard or overall build, but the screen. Because this bezel is so thin, I've noticed that you do or can notice a little bit of a waver in the display. It doesn't really give me, I'm not nervous from it, but there's no question that I do wonder that if you don't take great care, what will durability really be like? You can't really see it right now. You may see fingerprints from me pressing here because just the most mild touch, or actually, going from position to position, when you actually do start to use that 360-degree range of motion, you'll start to notice a wavering in the screen, sort of the oil spill effect. But you're not actually, looking at a broken screen. It's just a matter of, I don't want to call it flimsy because it's just so paper thin, the actual display, that's where we're running into the problem. So it's a matter of, I think, actual physics here. But because you're always going to be rotating this display, it does give me a little bit of, it does worry me slightly. But so far, nothing, at least in my experience, to speak to the fact that there will actually be a problem using this on a regular basis in any of the 4 different modes. But again, big upgrade on having the backlit keyboard that you can see right there. Of course, I have lights on, so you're not going to get the full effect. But since, as I mentioned, the original Yoga had no backlit keyboard, you don't really need to have the full effect. You just need to know you now have been granted a full-size keyboard. But again, screen resolution, even though I mentioned it's really a matter of personal preference, there's no question more is usually better in this case. As I mentioned, for looking at photographs, it's great. Video looks great on it. A little bit of backlight bleed, and yes, there are some dead pixels. I'm not going to take the time to actually, give you close-ups on the display and show you them, but they're there, and that's part of, unfortunately, I hate to say it, what I expected from Lenovo, because they're more about value and durability than necessarily making sure that there's no backlight bleed or dead pixels. I can't weigh in yet on battery life because I have not put it through enough cycles to really give any solid numbers, but things seem relatively in line with all other Haswell based Ultrabooks running this same processor clocked at 1.6 gigahertz. And, the card reader performs relatively well. I haven't benchmarked it, but I've used it, of course, to look at stills. USB ports work well. And I can't speak to charging time either yet because everything's been partial. I haven't done a full drain to give you guys an entire picture. But I like the look. I like the build. I could live without the dead pixels and the mild backlight bleed. But overall, I still think that even with the critiques that I've given this machine thus far in the short amount of time that I've spent with it, it's a very good compromise, if you even want to call it that, because you may be so in love with the design of the Yoga that the improvements, the enhancement, the all of the specifications, and of course this brand new, incredibly high resolution LCD bring to the table really ultimately might boil down to outweighing all of the slight things you have to live with, because you are, after all, getting all of this delivered at a price point you will not find anywhere else in the market. Forget that you can't get the 380-degree capability of the Yoga from any other manufacturer either. So really impressive, like everything that the Yoga represents. Going to spend more time with it so I can continue to give all of you more updates on what I think of this machine and whether or not it's worth your hard-earned money. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.